Good evening. Thanks for showing up to Resource Stage tonight. And I have an awesome delay effect on. Fantastic. Is that gone now? Okay, great. Thanks for coming to Resource Stage. Thanks for coming to Horizon Solutions. This is the first of our Resource Stage seminars and events for the fall of 2025. We took a little bit of a break through the summer, and which many of you know, because I know many of you were at our conference and different things that we've done. And tonight is another one of the opportunities, because you've shown up here or because you're watching the live stream live, that you will be entered in for, sorry, that was me, that you will be entered into the draw for the Genelec monitors that we're giving away in December. Tonight, we are talking about moving lights, and we're going to talk about a variety of different things. I've done this before, and I've probably, over the last 20 years, I've probably done this like maybe 6 or 7 times in a resource stage sort of an environment. And each time I've kind of taken a different type of approach than we're going to take tonight. Normally what I do is I'll sit down and I'll say, let's figure out how one of these lights works. We'll open it up and go through the details, talk about DMX and so on and so forth. I decided we're not going to do that tonight. If you want to know more about DMX, or if you want to know about control, we have other seminars that you can find on our YouTube page, or you can go to resourcestage.ca and learn that stuff. With that being said, it is important that understanding how DMX plays into how a moving light works is very important, and how many channels are different fixtures and how you can plug them together, all that kind of stuff, but that's not what we're going to talk about tonight. Instead, I thought we should take an approach where we maybe look at how do most of our customers actually use a moving light. And there's lots of different things you can do with these fixtures. You can have them spinning around, and you can, you watch any concert on TV, or you can spend an exorbitant amount of money to go to concerts these days at Rogers Center or wherever. You could see a lot of stuff going on, but most of us don't have the sort of budget to have the 400, 500, or 600 moving lights at our community theaters or in our churches. Not really. So I thought, you know what, we'll take a little bit of a different approach, and we'll kind of walk through sort of, this is how many of our clients use moving lights or want to use moving lights, beyond the let's just see them all flash and wiggle. This fixture right here is kind of near and dear to my heart, because this is a high-end track spot. The high-end track spot is the first light I ever used going back to like something 1990 something. And I went probably 96, 97, something of that sort. And it's a really, really simple moving light, where the light itself is a light bulb in the back of the fixture, sends light out the front. There is a gobo wheel, there's a color wheel, and then there's a mirror on the front, and you can move it around. Not that dissimilar to a fixture that we sell pretty regularly these days, which is an ETC color source spot with an IQ on the stage so dark, which was my request. Sorry to you online. But that is actually a very valid way of doing a moving light sort of a fixture in a community theater or in a church or in a school application, because there's a lot less moving parts than there is in the other fixtures that we're going to talk about tonight. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit later on, but I just wanted to say, using moving lights a long time ago, and it's cool because it's a real simple foundation where the things that companies were building into moving lights back in the 90s are still in moving lights today, and are still important pieces in moving lights. In fact, ETC now owns this company, High End, out of Texas, and they still today do build moving mirror fixtures for very specific applications. Okay? All right. So for starters, the console that I'm using tonight is the Camsys Quick Q20. That is not because I really like this console or because I really think that this console is perfect for everybody. It's that this was the console that was handy today. Most of the things that I'm going to be talking about today are things that you should be able to do on many of the consoles that I know most of you have here, that I remember anyway. You should be able to do a lot of the things that we're talking about because we're mostly just talking about building relatively simple things. The fixture that we have over here on the road case is an ETC high-end Lone Star. And the Lone Star fixture is rated at approximately 15,000 lumens, give or take. It's fairly compact, it's around 50 pounds, and it's got a number of features which we're going to talk through this evening. The first thing that when we're looking at moving lights is the very first thing that everybody wants to do is they want to know about it moving. Oh, I should point out this. This is a picture that I found online. It's actually a video that somebody had mentioned that this was their poor man's moving light. If you can see that, it's a little bit hard to see there. That is an oscillating fan where the fan's been taken off of it, and they've attached what looked like a pin spot to the top of it, and it basically moves back and forth. You know, I guess. But, you know, the most boring thing that a moving light can do is actually moving. There's a whole lot of other things that you could do with a moving light that are way, way more interesting than the fact that it moves. And that's maybe part of my goal tonight, is to kind of show you some of those things. Because the movement side of things is often way overdone. There's lots and lots of times when having a fixture that moves just because of the movement is not worthwhile. So let's kind of go through some of this here. This fixture here, again, the Lone Star. Most moving lights today have a pan of 540 degrees. So if I bring this fixture all the way back to its 0 position, then it starts here, and then I can bring all the way around continuously. Ariton is a company out of Europe that is building their reputation on fixtures that have continuous spin. And they also have continuous tilt. But most manufacturers are 540 degrees in the pan. And then on the tilt side, we can do the same thing. So here to here is approximately 280 degrees. Sometimes they're 260 degrees. Sometimes they're 240 degrees, depending on the manufacturer. But it's approximately that. Okay? This fixture, which I'm maybe going to move before I blind anybody. This fixture is a Chauvet wash fixture that's doing something funky, so let's just get rid of that. This is a Chauvet wash fixture, and same sort of a thing. It's got a similar sort of tilt, and again, the on it is basically the same. And the reason I bring this up is, again, right? If you mount the fixtures in such a way so that they are pointed all at the wall, and then it may be that where the fixture wants to start is in a bad spot when you're programming. Okay? We'll talk about that a little bit more. All right. So I got to thinking, let's kind of start to put together a little bit of a, maybe not a show, but a kind of the common things that people want to do with a moving light. So if I take this light right here, and I am going to tilt this light, and I'm going to have it come up to what I'm going to say is my center stage. So the first thing that we've already talked about lots is movement. I can control the pan and the tilt of this fixture. Okay? Immediately, the next thing that I want to be able to do is I want to be able to change the size and the focus of this. So the first thing that I will do on this fixture is I'll change the zoom. Not all moving lights have the ability to change zoom. The less expensive the least expensive, the less expensive. The cheaper your light is, the less features it's got. And zoom is one of those things that gets cut if you're looking for a less expensive light. So if you're looking for a less expensive light from, say, the Chauvet DJ lineup of fixtures, then you're likely going to lose zoom. There are some fixtures in that line that do have zoom, but there's lots that don't. And so it's something that you want to think about, because the ability to be able to change the size of this circle, this fixture is kind of nice because I can get a pretty sharp focus with this, very sharp. And this is actually, for those of us who used intelligent lights that had discharge bulbs in them, you have no idea how amazing this, how flat this is compared to what we used to use. Because what we used to use, it always had a hot spot, and it wasn't always in the middle. And they often were different colors depending on which, how long those bulbs had been around for. LEDs today are so much flatter. We are definitely, what's the right word? I guess spoiled, I suppose, to an extent. So so far I've touched the pan and the tilt, so my movement, and I've touched the zoom and the focus. Now, while we're talking about what the iris looks like, because that would be the next step from zoom. And there are some fixtures that do have irises, but they don't have zoom. So this is what the iris does when I bring in the iris on this light. And what have we noticed about this as soon as I do this? What have we noticed? It's lost its focus. So that's the first thing. So I have to adjust this to get the focus. Okay. What else did we notice? Yeah, you're both saying the same thing. So it's a less perfect circle because now we have sharp edges where the iris is. A little bit of fall off towards the outside. How about the fact that I don't think I can actually focus up on this at this distance, so that's something to keep in mind. But I've also actually just cut out a bunch of light, because zoom is actually changing lenses. The lenses are shifting, and now the size of the light is actually changing, where iris is cutting out light. Does that make sense? Okay, and you can see where the iris starts to come in here, and then I get to a point where now the iris disappears. See that? So, if an iris is cutting out light, now I'm actually losing some intensity when I use the iris. Where zoom, if I'm adjusting the zoom, I appreciate the fact that yes, when I get bigger, then it's not as bright all the way across, except that that's a function of it's actually spreading more light over a larger area, as opposed to I'm cutting out the light. Okay, am I making sense? So coming back to the comment of my focus now is in a different spot, that is one of the important things to understand about how these fixtures are built. Sometimes people get the impression that a moving light is a video projector on a yoke. That is a thing. Although there's not a lot of them out there anymore, it is a thing that you can still buy, but this is not a video projector just on a yoke. This is a light source with a whole bunch of pieces of metal and glass between the light source and the front of the light. And because of all those different pieces of glass and steel, it's going to shape the light, but it's also, physics is going to come into play there. And you at some point in time are going to have to adjust the focus and different things to make everything work together. Making sense? This is going to be a theme as we go through tonight. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and record this as my first cue. the next thing I want to do is I'm going to bring up these two lights here, and I think I want to do something with them on the sides where it kind of helps to, if I was standing on stage to speak, maybe to make it look like something, then I want to have some other lights going around it, okay? Logan, can we lose the cyc lights? So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to move these fixtures up to there. So what have we noticed? Yeah, I'm actually thinking about something more obvious. I got a fixture pointed at the wall over here. Why do I have a fixture pointed at the wall? I selected both of these lights at the same time, and all I did, they started off right here, pointed straight down. I pointed them up. They're oriented differently. This is in a church, and we'll say, hey, can you throw the moving lights out on the stage, here, 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 and here. When I say throw, we understand that's a stage term, right? Yes, turn it. Except that this happens. And you might be like, whatever, Carl, why are you making such a big deal about this? Well, if one fixture is off by 5 degrees and one fixture is off by 2 degrees and one fixture is off at 90 degrees, then every single time you touch those lights, now you have to adjust each individual one. And if you're only using 2 lights, it'll be annoying. If you're using 12 lights or 24 lights or 124 lights, it will become very, very frustrating, very, very fast. So please, and I'm not going to get up on a ladder and do it tonight, but please make sure that your fixtures are side by side and they are all in the same orientation. And there are lots of fixtures like that one over there that when you flip the light over, it actually has an arrow that points and says front. Actually has an arrow that points and says front. Now, they don't come with compasses. Now, with that being said, I'm going to dim these down for a second. I'm going to show you something really interesting. We're going to go back to these 2 lights over on the side here, and I'm going, oops, sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. 100%. Do you see a problem here? The problem is that 2 from ETC said, which to me makes some sense, that the angle is going to be one direction, and for some reason the folks at Chauvet decided it was going to be a different direction. Here's the part that's really, really annoying about that. There are only so many factories in the world that build moving lights. A lot of them come from the same factory, but somebody decided that they wanted this one to be like this and this one to be like this. And so for today and for every other day, whenever we use these 2 lights together, we have to remember that the Lone Stars get oriented this direction on the stage, and the Chauvet Rogue Outcast R2X, or whatever it's called, has to be rotated 90 degrees from that so that they match up when we're grabbing them together. Because if I go over here and I rotate this like this, I think I'm doing it the right way. Then when I grab both of them for tilt, oh, darn it. See, I had a 50-50 chance. I did say I just thought I did it the right way. So now, when I rotate that, then at least now I know that they're doing the same thing, right? And we now have both of these fixtures in our rental inventory as well as many other fixtures. And I think what we're going to end up doing is marking, because the Chauvets are the newest fixture in our rental inventory, we'll be marking those fixtures to say, this is actually the front, not what they say is the front, because that is ridiculous. Okay, getting back to our thing over here. So I need to get back to fixing this light and moving it to where I want it to be. So we'll get it over here. And I have to tell you, there are some things that are even more important about positioning that we're not going to get into tonight. that you'll find the more you program, the more you just say, wow, if I don't get these things all working together, then they're going to be really funky. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I am going to adjust the focus on these, and I'm doing it together. And they're not going to be exactly the same, but they're going to be pretty close. And then I'm going to go through and adjust color. I said that the track spot, this old guy here, used a color wheel. And the way that a color wheel works is kind of like, if you're familiar with old school scrollers, as you switch colors, then it actually is switching colors on the wheel, which is really kind of fun. Like, you can create some really great effects if you're doing the opening of a cannabis store, or if you are doing something for the Ukraine, or whatever it is that you're doing, you can do some interesting things, which is kind of cool. That is the color wheel. The problem with a color wheel, well, first of all, I should say a color wheel is really great if what you're... Does that make sense? Okay? Because those colors, I can't if it's a fixture that only has a color wheel. That's not to say that color wheel doesn't have its place. It's not to say that a color wheel isn't really helpful for certain things. It's to say that you need to use it at the right time, because you need to understand that there's going to be other things that fit around that. Okay? So the alternative on a fixture like this one is that I've got color mixing. There are two different kinds of color mixing in the moving light world today. There is the similar sort of color mixing that's been around for moving lights for a very long time, as well as the same kind of color mixing that you've probably used with Fresnels or Parkans or Source 4s or 6x9s or whatever it is that you're using in your theater or school or church. And that is subtractive color mixing. The color wheel is using subtractive color mixing. It's got a white light and a color wheel is going in front of it, and that dichroic is allowing a certain amount of color, a certain type of color to be passing through. Okay? Certain range of the color. I can do color mixing with this fixture where it is using 3 different flags to be able to create all of these different colors. And then I can do some pretty nice mixes between this color and this color, or this color, or this color, or this color, that kind of thing. And I can bounce between them, as well as getting some colors that are nice and in between. Okay? And they're really, really great. This fixture, again, is in a different price point. And so at some point in time, you might say, hey, you know what? For what I'm doing in my show, I don't necessarily... Where is it here? I can go to this color, and it gives me a reasonable CTO, a reasonable color correction that I can use side by side with my other fixtures. So maybe a fixture that doesn't have color mixing can work okay for you. And then there are other times when you say, you know what, that's actually not going to cut it. I really do need to go to color mixing, and then you have that option. Does that make sense? All right. So I am going to create a look here, and you know what? I think the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the size of this, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, adjust this, and I'm going to throw in a gobo. Is everybody familiar with what a gobo is? It's funny. I've talked to many clients over the years, and some of them who've been doing theater for 10, 15, 20 years, and they didn't know what a gobo was, which I always think is kind of interesting, but that's okay. It's fun to be able to tell people what gobos are for the first time. And if you are if you're not sure what a gobo is, or if you're not here and you're watching online and you're not sure, I always say that the most famous gobo is the Batman gobo. The Batman symbol is a fantastic example of what a gobo is, and essentially, although it's actually a really terrible implementation of a gobo, that's a whole other discussion, but yeah, this is what a gobo is, And there are a number of different gobos within this fixture, and I can go through, focus it up to whichever gobo it is that I'm looking for, and I can get kind of a nice look. This fixture has a number of different gobos in it, but it only has one gobo wheel. So some fixtures have multiple gobo wheels, some of which are fixed gobos that are stamped on a steel wheel, and some of them have rotating gobos. A fixture like this old fixture has a stamped wheel where it's just gobos that are all on one disc, sort of a thing. And what you get is what you get. Whereas these Lone Star fixtures, it has a combination of steel and glass gobos that will give us an opportunity to do a whole bunch of things. And you can put custom gobos in this. So I can bring up that gobo. I can do everything with the fixture that I was doing before, as far as being able to adjust the zoom, which again then requires me to adjust the focus. And I can also throw it in and out of focus, and it can create really great effects. Okay, and we'll maybe talk about that a little bit more. This is also a really good time to go back and talk for a second about the iris. If you weren't sure what I was saying earlier on about the iris cutting out light versus changing the size, when I start to bring in the iris here, you can see that it's actually cutting out some of the intensity. And if I change my focus there, as opposed to changing the size, which is on here on the zoom. Okay? Some manufacturers and some fixtures have the ability to be able to determine within reason what distance you're shooting for when you are focusing something up. That sounds like a little bit of science fiction. It takes a little bit of setup to do this, but what you can do is you can set it up and say, my throw distance is, I don't know, what are we at here? Like 18 feet or something like that? Not really far. My throw distance is 17, 18 feet. And so as I adjust the zoom, then the focus follows, with the theory that as that changes, then my gobo doesn't go out of focus as I change the zoom. Does that make sense? It's just math, right? But it does need to know approximately what that distance is. Okay, so moving along here. I've got my look. I've got this position here with my center and my two other lights. And now I'm going to go ahead and record that. Okay, and I think I'm going to take this out and record that just because it's a nice look like that. All right, let's pull this out. And I think the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and light up the podium, because that is a pretty typical thing that people do in a lot of our theaters and a lot of churches and a lot of schools. Everybody wants to be able to light the podium, partly because that podium keeps moving. And we set a light, and then the principal at the school decides that no, the podium should be 2 feet over, even though you did ask them before you set the position. So we'll go ahead. We'll move this over here. Okay, and something like that. And I'll grab this one and bring it over. Do this. Oops. One of the advantages to using a console that's half decent is that you can go to fine control, which means that the resolution on the pan and the tilt is much. Okay, now this is getting ridiculous. It's much tighter so that I can slowly move it over. All right, now I'm not doing that anymore. There we go. So I can slowly get the light to where I want it to be. And There's two different schools of thought on podiums, and this is a freebie because this doesn't really have anything to do with moving lights. Some people would say, oh, a podium should always be a really tight focus. Oh, take off the fine. Thank you. A podium should be a really tight focus. It should look kind of something like this. And that's fine. Personally, I don't like this look as much, partly because I feel like it looks very spotty, and it also, if somebody their head bounces out of the light, like mine often does when I'm doing these sorts of things, then it's a very sharp drop. So you've got a couple of different ways you can do this. You could adjust the focus. That's a very simple way of getting the fixture to look a little softer on the edges. Or you could do the same thing that we do with a traditional fixture. If we're setting up a number of spot fixtures to light a stage, whether, again, it's for a corporate event or whether it's for theater or what have you, then often what we'll do is we will focus the fixtures to a sharp edge and make sure that all the fixtures are focused to that same sharp edge. And then we'll use diffusion to drop into the lights so that now we know that all of the lights are focused the same. Does that make sense? Because if I use a sharp edge and then the diffusion, then it's consistent soft edges across. Whereas if I am adjusting the focus on each one, well, it might be a little bit this, it might be a little bit that, and that kind of thing. So it's kind of handy that this fixture, has diffusion. So if I go to here, it actually has two different diffusions, but we'll just talk about the one tonight. If I drop in the diffusion, it just does a nice job of softening out the edges without killing the intensity, without making it really kind of weird looking in the middle, as can sometimes happen with focus. Drop in that diffusion and it looks pretty nice. And just so that you can maybe see that, actually it looks pretty good on the camera. So if we take that out, drop it in, it does a nice job. Make sense? All right. I guess the only other thing I would maybe do is, and different people have different thoughts on this. I know that sometimes we have different conversations around here depending on whether or not we're lighting a podium for the room or if we're lighting the podium for camera. There can be different things you might want to do, but we may want to look at just kind of softening up the color on this as well, and maybe making it look a little bit warmer. And again, that's something that's nice that you can do with a color mixing fixture that you can't necessarily do with the other fixtures. Although, just for interest's sake, if I take that back and we go to the color correction, which is in here somewhere, that's the full CTO. If I go back to half CTO, that looks half decent too. It's passable. One of the things that we often find in situations like this is that if I am looking at this light, if you came walking into this light and just looked at that without having seen anything else that we've done tonight, you would probably look at that and go, oh, that looks nice. It's when you compare it to something else, that's when you might go, well, okay. All right, work with what you got. So that is lighting the podium and using some diffusion. I'm going to go ahead and record that as another look. And just because this is kind of a theme we've been doing so far, I'm going to take these two lights, move them over as well. And the nice thing is I can move them together-ish. There we go. And I'm going to go to a different gobo. And I'm going to throw that gobo out of focus. Because I do think that, personally, I like that kind of thing. Again, not everybody is necessarily going to agree with me. That's all right. It's lighting, not sound. it's art. See? Okay, so I can grab that. I'm going to record that. I'll take out these so that I've got the ability to have the light when somebody's walking on or off stage. And yeah, looks kind of cool. All right. So far we've learned about movement. We've learned about how you hang in the fixtures, where you're putting them. We've talked about zoom and focus and iris and gobos and color. We're almost done, I think. Okay, no, seriously, we're almost done. So I think the next thing we're going to do is I want to talk a little bit about movement in the middle. So I'm going to grab all these lights. I'm going to reset them all in both position, and let's get rid of the gobos. Okay. And again, I'm going to run into the same problem with that one light, but we'll come back and fix it in just a second. I'll move these guys over. Let's grab that one light over there. Try not to blind anybody. All right. So what happens when somebody says, I want to create, this is always the case. Somebody says, oh, you rented moving lights for the show. That's great. I need a water effect. No, you've never seen that before? Nobody? Really? Okay, thanks, Logan. You got my back. I get this request all the time. I don't know what kind of shows you guys are doing. So I'm going to just walk through this really quickly. And I usually start with, again, focusing things up. Then I usually go through and pick a gobo that I think is going to work half decently for this, which this is actually a really cool gobo because it's glass and you can do some kind of interesting things with it. But for today, I think what I'm going to do is maybe we'll try this one and this kind of seashell-y, wavy, liney thingy. And I'm going to take this up a little bit higher so that we can all see it and maybe adjust the, sorry, we can adjust the zoom on it. And now I'm going to just one by one go through and get the fixtures so that if they're all in a similar sort of spot for focus, then when I adjust them each, then they're all going to kind of move together. So one of the cool things that you can do with a fixture like this is you can rotate the gobos. And I can rotate them on an indexed sort of a wheel. And this just rotates them like this to a specific spot, but it doesn't give me the ability to give it continuous rotation. It is just individual lights or individual gobos that I'm rotating. Cool? There's a couple of different reasons why you might want to have this indexed gobo rotation. The first one being, well, if I'm trying to create wavy lines because I'm doing the show SpongeBob at my school, then this is a great way to do it. Because now I can create these wavy lines and I can grab these and I can say, oh, perfect. I'm going to make these maybe yellow and these ones I'm going to make them green. And I can create kind of a cool thing that way. Right? Pretty neat. The other really common one we do, and we do this with corporate clients all the time, but we also do this with some of our theater clients, is we'll put a gobo in it that is a custom gobo that is a logo. So that custom gobo could be a sponsor. It could be the theater, the name of the theater. There's all kinds of things. And we've had some schools where they've bought a custom gobo that is the school's logo, and they use it for different sorts of assemblies and that kind of thing. But then they also use it before a show. So there's all kinds of things like that. So anyway, we've got these rotated here. The other thing that you can do is you can actually have the gobos do a continuous rotation. And this is where it is different on different consoles. So I believe that I need to, whoa, that is not the one. So I can get that so that that's in Gobo rotation, and then I can adjust the rotation speed, which seems to be not exactly the same on all these fixtures today. It's partly because they are all different. They are all different zooms, so they look a little bit different. It's important to note that there's lots of things I can do with this where I might want to change the speeds on different ones to get a different kind of effect. This is okay, but I feel like maybe if we went to a Gobo like this, maybe this is an option for giving me something more of a water effect. And maybe I will do something with colors like this, and then maybe something like this. And then I'm going to take that, and now I am going to go to a different piece, and I'm going to just drop all of these but one of them so that you can see what I'm doing here. Gobos are great. You can do all kinds of neat things with them, but dropping in a prism is a whole lot more fun. So this is a 5-faceted prism that fits in front of the Gobo wheel. So now I have light, color, Gobo, prism. What is happening to my intensity when I drop this stuff in? Cut by 5, exactly. And that is if the glass is really, really good, then it's cut by 5. Then the light is going to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. Remember I said that this fixture was specified at 15,000 lumens. 15,000 lumens is pretty bright, but it's also a very compact fixture. So all of the light is being sent through a very, very small area. In fact, the Gobos in this fixture are about the size of a nickel. Yeah. There are lots of fixtures out there where the Gobos are the size of a toonie, or they might even be a little bit bigger than that. This fixture, they're closer to about the size of a nickel. So would these glass ones? Some of them are glass, some of them are steel. Okay? So when you figure that, it kind of does make sense that we're definitely taking out, we're kind of pushing it on the fixture. That's interesting. I hit something and I wasn't sure why it was working the way it is. This is a complete aside. This is in the category of you really need to know the lights that you're working with. This fixture, the prism and the diffusion are so close together that you can't do both in the same time. So the fixture knows that if I bring in the diffusion, then it kicks out the prism. So I was wondering there for a second, why is it that my prism disappeared even though it's showing that it's got prism? And it's because the diffusion kicked it out. So let's get rid of the prism here for a sec. We'll take it right out. And then I want to show you a second prism that this fixture has, which is a linear prism. You could just stare at this for a while. You might go crazy. For some of us, it's less of a long trip. I missed a fixture. Why am I missing a fixture again? It's because of how I did that. See, now that one guy is upset with me. One moment. There we go. Okay. So, I have 4 fixtures. They all have the same Gobo in them, and they now have prisms in them. And I'm going to say, let's take 2 of these and let's actually take the prism and let's see if I can do this. There we go. I want the prism not to do that. I want it to rotate slower. Okay? So now I'm going to take all 4 of those fixtures and I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to adjust the focus. And by playing with the focus, am I getting closer to water? It's a pretty cool effect. And you can see, like, some of this is rotating a little bit faster, some of it's rotating a little bit slower. You could decide how you want to play with that, and you can create some pretty interesting things. I'm going to go ahead and record this one. One thing you could do is you could change this and record it as a chase so that you're slowly adjusting the color or slowly adjusting the effect. The focus or the zoom or the rotation or the, and get some interesting things going on there. Cool? And again, like, I don't know, maybe you're doing SpongeBob, or maybe you're doing Little Mermaid, or maybe you're doing something. Years and years and years ago, I remember I was doing Christmas Carol. There we go. It was there. And throughout the show, the lighting designer wanted to be able to give that idea of time, right? So many times throughout that show, time is changing. And so using gobo rotators to be able to create this idea of the entire floor of the stage was changing speed as time changed. And then it could actually rotate backwards, right? To try to get that kind of an effect. It was pretty cool. And so right now we've got some blues in here, but this can change really fast if I start changing the color. And I can make it so that it's a completely different sort of a thing. Or now I can go in and I can say, hey, I'm going to change my gobo. And now that's a completely different look. Now I'm not doing anything that is, maybe now I'm not doing water. Instead, maybe I'm doing that. Maybe I'm doing that tribute band that we brought into the theater to help to pay the rent. And they're doing Jefferson Airplane, right? And you need to do something on the wall to make it kind of look like something. And so you do something of this sort, right? There's all kinds of fun things that you can do with this. Cool? All right. I'm going to go ahead and record that. Okay. So what am I missing? What else did you want to see about moving lights? What else did you want to learn about moving lights? Anything? Nothing? Yes.
Taking a moving light and using it as its own follow spot.
Oh boy, that's on my list, but it's near the end of my list. Okay, the question was for those online was, what about using a moving light as a follow spot? I love to hate that question. We're going to come back to that in just a second. I do want to talk about 1 or 2 other things really quickly. First of all, I've been, throughout the whole evening, I've been going through and I have been recording everything. And I've said that as I've gone, right? So let's take a look at the stack. And hopefully I did this right and I will not have made too much of a mess of this, but we'll see. So here's the first thing we did. And if I pull this up, I think this is all got, let's see if we can figure this out. This has Why isn't that? There we go. Okay, everything on here right now has a 0 fade time. So the fixture movement is all whatever it takes the light to get to that. Okay, so if I press go, there is the other 2 pieces that I brought in there, right? And I press go, that one goes out. That comes over here. And then that was it. That's what we did, right? So let me just go back to here. Am I the only one who finds that a little jarring? Right? Because it's snap, snap, snap. So the first thing I can do is I can go through, and I know that you can't see what I'm doing there. I'll just tell you what I'm doing, and you can trust me. I can go through and I can put in fade times on things. I can put fade times, and of course different consoles do this different ways. Some consoles can get incredibly sophisticated on fade times to the point that you can do fade times not just on the fade up and fade down and on the attributes fader, which on this console, that's where it maxes out. I can do a fade up, fade down, and I can do a all attributes that are not dimmer, I can assign the fade. Some consoles can get you to the point where I can have a different fade time on the pan than I do on the tilt. I can have a different fade time on the cyan than I do on the magenta than I do on the, what's the other one? Yellow. I can set a different fade time on all those different things if you really want to. But there's another thing. I'm going to just switch the console mode, and different consoles, again, do this different ways, and hopefully this works the way that I expect it to work. A little faster than I wanted it to be. Let me go back to here for a second and see if I can make some changes. So I want to... Sorry, just bear with me for a second. Because unfortunately there isn't a fast way to do this on this console. It doesn't allow me to... Oh, wait a minute. Maybe it does allow me to. Huh. Yes, it does. Okay. So there's the next 2 pieces, okay? And then the next thing we did after this was a fade out. Okay? And then what was supposed to happen next? My artsy look. So there's my artsy look. So what did I do differently? Let's go back. So I've done this. Here's my first one, right? Okay, and then behind this, now I should have a couple of lights come up with the circles, right? Okay, and then after this, then the center spotlight goes out. Okay, and then what was the next thing? Light comes up on the podium. I did a crossfade. I've got 2 lights that are there. Okay, and then I bring up the next 2. These are the 2 lights that just a second ago were doing dots over here. This is called different things depending on which manufacturer you're talking to. But kind of throughout the industry, it's often referred to as move while dark, or move when dark, or sometimes people come up with other fun names for it. The idea is that if we go back to that first cue, which I think go to Q1. If we go back to the first cue, hey Logan, Are you able to bring up the house lights? Is that possible? Or I didn't tell you I wanted to do this. There we go. Okay. Ignoring as much as you can what's going on here. Watch the lights. Okay? So first thing it's doing is this. Then these lights come up. Okay? Now, the next thing that's going to happen is fixture number 4 is going to go out. And watch what it does. Okay? It's now in position. I do enough talking and stalling like I'm a magician so that you don't know that it's moving. Then I press this button and those 2 lights are like, yep, we're there. And then the other 2, what did they just do? They just moved. I didn't program that in. I let the console do it. Because what the console's doing is the console is saying, when I'm not on, when I am dark, then I'm going to move into the next position that I need to go to so that I'm ready to be in that position. Yes. That is a console feature, not a fixture feature. So you can do that with any fixture. You can do that with the old school Trek spot. The difference is the thing's so noisy that everybody will hear it move. But it is true that you can do that with any light because that is the console is saying, hey, I'm going to do this. And it's not just movement. You'll notice if we go back, I mean, we're staring at the lights, but if we go back, that fixture is moving over. Now I do this. When these fixtures move, and they're moving really nice and slowly, they're also changing gobo. And they're changing color so that when we bring it up over here, then they're in that different color. When you go to a show at the Avon Theater that is not a musical, they are trying to get everything so very quiet. Incredibly quiet. And they build their move well dark, which on their console they can adjust the timing for what that move well dark is going to be. But they're building their move well dark in such a way so that it is so incredibly slow, so that during that dramatic time, the fixture is moving and you're not hearing it. Because it would be really bad if it just went shoo, and everybody heard all 30 lights go shoo over to the other side. I've been working on that sound effect. I hope you liked it. That sort of a thing is what's so important about making that magic happen. So, I'm hoping that what you'll notice tonight is that a lot of the most important things about using moving lights doesn't actually have anything to do with the specific lights. It's about how are you implementing those moving lights, right? And how are you setting up your programming? If we go back to how I was running the console earlier, and I was running it in what they refer to in this brand of console as live mode, in live mode, it's designed to be snap, 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 because that's what we want. We want things to snap. We want things to move. Now, I've put in fade times so that it's a little bit smoother, but it is designed in such a way so that it's that kind of a thing. But if you want to just polish up your show a little bit, then this is really great. What this does mean, though, is that, and here's where it's like, darn it, Carl's giving us a sales pitch. Sometimes having an extra light means that it can look that much cleaner. Because now we can fade out and we can bring up the other light, and we can fade out and bring up the other light. Just in the same way as when we're doing video production for many of our schools and churches, where they have a certain number of PTZ cameras, they might have 2 PTZ cameras, but they can make it look like they've got 4 or 6, because this one does this, and then while this one's live, this one's moving. And then then we switch, and then this one's moving. That kind of thing. Same sort of an idea. Now, it's not to say you have to get a lot of moving lights. It's just to say that if you can be strategic about how you do this, so that you use moving lights to do these things, and then you use your conventional fixtures or your LED spot fixtures or whatever it is to do the other things, then you can bounce back and forth. Am I making sense? All right, cool. Okay. You're gonna make me talk about the Followspot thing. All right. So, first thing I'll say is that I don't like using moving lights as follow spots. Okay? And I typically will say, if moving lights like follow spots worked so well, then why don't the biggest acts in the world use that? Why is it that when 3 or 4 weeks ago when I was in Montreal, Cirque du Soleil has 4 follow spot operators climbing the truss right before the show starts? When there's so many different options to make it happen. In fact, some of them are Canadian made. There's some Canadian made solutions for follow spot moving light options. And they often will involve a belt pack or a something stuck on the person, and as that person moves, then the light follows them around. But depending on where this is on the person will have a determination on what's going on. Another really successful idea is that you have what looks like a follow spot with a camera or with a TV in front of you, and then there's a camera on the moving light. In fact, these Lone Star fixtures have an option from the manufacturer for the low price of $3,200. We can put a camera on. Scott, it's an NDI camera. It's pretty cool. You put an NDI camera on the front of the light, and then you can use that NDI camera as part of your show. But you can also use that NDI camera so that using a joystick, using a Xbox controller, or using the really expensive $10,000 piece, you can move around the light like it's a follow spot, and you're seeing it from the position of the moving light. There's also options where you can grab multiple fixtures and you can then get them down to a couple of encoders, and then you can move them. And what's really neat, and this is getting geeky about it, but there's some really cool things where you can only have control of certain lights throughout the show, and then the lighting designer at the back of the room who's running the show has control for other times, and you can switch back and forth depending on what's going on and when you need it and when you don't. That's usually when you've got a lot more than 3 moving lights. But the cost to do that is excessive. And we've looked at it for some of our clients who would really like to be able to do it. And usually, not always, but usually when people see the cost and it's pushing into that $100,000, then usually they look at it and say, you know, I can find a high school kid to run a follow spot. There's ways of making that work, right? So with that being said, let's talk about how you can use a moving light as a follow spot. First thing first is we need to decide where we're going to be running the light, because I have on the console here a tilt encoder and a pan encoder. And I will be the first one to tell you that this console's encoders are too small for this application. If you're wanting to do this, you really should have a console that has larger encoders so that as you're moving it, it's easier. This one is not awesome for that. But even with that being said, if I decide that I wanted to just move it across the stage, and just so that I feel a little bit more like I'm being professional about this, I will zoom it out and I will focus it. And of course, if I was doing opera, then I would definitely have a diffusion on it. Or if I was doing dance. So if I want to just move this across the stage, if I'm just going to follow somebody to walk across the stage, then I can just do this. Right? I'm just moving the pan. And thankfully, every actor I've ever worked with is so incredibly good at walking at a reasonable pace and always predictable as to how they move that it's perfect. And I can just do this. And if you live in that world, well, I don't live in that world. The other part of it is that what happens when I need to start moving because they've now walked down stage? Okay, so now I'm coming down like this, and it's with a couple of encoders. Can I do it? maybe I can. I can also adjust things like the pan tilt speed, which depending on the fixture may have an effect on how it's moving in real time. Sometimes it doesn't. This one it does not. It's going to be about the recall speed, not about the setting speed. So we're just going to take that out. Again, I could adjust it using the fine mode, except the fine mode is so incredibly slow. It's pretty nasty. Another way of doing this is to, and I've actually already set this up so that I don't need to show you, I don't need to go through the settings for you, but I will show you here. If I, oops, let me clear that. Hello? Did I, there we go. I can move this fixture across like this. So what I have done is I've recorded this position as being a starting position in a queue. Now, when I say queue on this console, it's called queue. On many consoles, it might be called a preset, it might be called a submaster, that sort of a thing. And then as the subject were to walk across the stage, now I can use this other fader, this other preset, queue, submaster, whatever you want to call it, and I can follow them across the stage with just adjusting the pan. What I did with this is I set a preset that only records the pan information. And the pan information that it has is just over there. So as I adjust this, it's saying, okay, well, 0 is over here, 100% is over there, and 50% is somewhere in the middle. Does that make sense? Now, if you think that you're really, really smart, then you might go, okay, well, if I can do that for pan, then I bet you I could do that for tilt. And then they say, okay, so now I can kind of follow the person without using encoders. I can use this and I can follow them as they walk down the aisle. What this does for you and where it is that this is actually kind of advantageous is because you're setting those specific positions. So you're setting your beginning point and your end point using those two different submasters. Now I have increased the resolution from here to here. Does that make sense? So now I've got 50% of these two positions is going to be right here. That's something I can work with, ish. Okay? Whereas if I'm using the encoders, how many degrees around can the pan go? How many degrees is the tilt? Whereas this, now I'm cutting it back and I'm saying that movement over that distance is much smaller and I can now do this. And I'm going to try something that I don't remember exactly how it works on this console, so let's just see. Right. Let's try that. Nope. I was just trying to see whether or not I can adjust. Some consoles will allow you to adjust the fade time for an attribute on the preset or on the submaster. And so that would give you the ability to have that a little bit slower. But it's questionable whether or not you really want that because, again, the talent that has a tendency to move a little bit faster and a little bit slower could be a problem. Is this making sense? So, can you follow somebody with a moving light? Yes. Would I suggest you do it? Not typically. Another way of doing this that I'm actually a bigger fan of is to have multiple cues. So for instance, one way of doing this would be to say, my first cue is going to be here, my second one is here, my third one is here, my fourth one is here, and I am going to change the speed on all of these cues so that I'm slowly bouncing through it and it looks like the light is moving. And that can give me the ability to say, not just go there, but it could be my first cue is here, my second cue is here, my third cue is here, and now that gets some sort of a flow if I know that that's what the talent is going to do. Right? And I have done that in shows, and I have done that with spiking the stage and saying, this is the first spot, this is the second, this is the third, and I'm watching and going through that. And tonight, the movement from there to there might happen in this amount of time, but tomorrow night it might be this amount of time. So I don't actually set that to just go, go, go. I set that in such a way so that I have to hit the go. Depending on the show, depending on whether or not you're working with a stage manager or not, depending. So, do I like using a moving light as a follow spot? Not a big fan. Can you do it? Yes. Does it become even slightly more complicated if you're using two lights? Yes. Right? Because now I'm working around with multiple things. And if you would like to buy the thing with the multiple cameras and the other stuff and the things and the stuff, yes, we will sell it to you. We're happy to do that. We'll install it. We'll train your people and everything. Okay. I wanted to show you a couple of other things here quickly. I'm going to bounce back to this light over here. I haven't really talked about the wash light much, other than the fact that the pan and tilt on it is kind of funky. This fixture kind of represents a few different things for us here that are kind of an interesting part of the industry today. So the first thing is that this is a wash fixture that's often referred to as a pancake wash fixture because it's flat, has a number of different elements in behind, and the fixture is controlled using a zoom that is on a worm motor, and it does make noise. And you know when it really makes noise? When it's sitting on top of an empty road case. The resonance is definitely there. But you can see that the zoom on it works pretty well, and I can go from, I guess this says that it is down to 8 degrees, so it's fairly tight, up to 66 degrees is what the manufacturer suggests that it is. Okay, so it's kind of cool. This fixture, if you remember earlier on, I said that many of the moving lights are subtractive color mixing. That does not mean that all spot fixtures are subtractive color mixing. For instance, that color source spot V is an additive color mixing fixture, as is this light. So this light is using red, green, and blue and white emitters to be able to create some really, really nice saturated colors, but also some pretty nice pastel-y sorts of colors too. And it's pretty fun. And it's cool that way. Okay? So it is a different piece of the industry in that it's additive color mixing. It's a different piece because it is a different kind of wash fixture that would be different than, say, a Fresnel wash fixture, which we do have some fixtures that are available that are moving lights or static lights that are more like a Fresnel, meaning that now I can shape the light. But barn doors on a moving light is a thing. They do exist. Absolutely they exist. We've got theaters around who have them, but they are a bit of a thing because then they're motorized moving barn doors, and that's a thing. But the other piece that's really interesting about this, that is really becoming an important part of the industry, is that this fixture is an IP65 rated light. That means that we can take this light outside when it's raining and we don't have to worry about it. That's not to say that we're going to leave it outside in a hurricane, but it is to say that regular rain, or if we're doing a show where it's outside, a Christmas event or something like that, we have no problem with taking these lights outside, and it's totally fine. It also means that they are, yes, absolutely, the pan is a little, or sorry, the zoom is a little bit noisier than I would like it to be, but the other functions are actually pretty quiet. One more and IP65 fixtures are available in so many different parts of the fixture world these days, whether you're talking about spot fixtures, moving lights, or moving light spot fixtures, profile fixtures, or wash fixtures. And then the other piece I just wanted to show you here is, and let's just see if I can get this right. I'm not going to get this right. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. So you do have the ability on these fixtures to adjust things like where the fixtures, what parts of the fixture are actually turning on, which can create some really interesting sorts of looks. And I can go in here and I can adjust the speed on this. And I can choose different kinds of effects. Not all of them are just strobing, right? And again, this is the part of the industry that is way more eye candy-ish and way less community theater. Okay? So that's one of the things that this fixture can do. And I'm realizing now that I forgot one of the most important things about these lights. And I think that the best way to show you this would be to do this. Well, at least we're going to try. I'm going to take my piece of paper. Can everybody see that paper okay? All right. I haven't tried this yet, so hopefully this works okay. So I'm going to take this light and move this over here. And this fixture is not just a spot fixture. This fixture is actually a profile light. So it gives me the opportunity to, and I focus this up, this gives me the opportunity to use shutters. So just like I would do if I was using a source 4, or if I was using a different kind of moving spot fixture, or sorry, a different kind of spot fixture. And where is, I can actually rotate that slightly, and then, and I really probably should have tried doing this before I told you I was going to do it. But I can go through and adjust this to be pretty accurate. So it's not perfect, but I can play with it. But you get the idea. Now I've got the ability to do some really interesting things on stage as far as I want to get a really nice, tight something. Remembering that framing shutters are essentially a square iris. I am cutting out light, right? So how I use my zoom, how I use my focus, how I use a gobo while I'm using framing shutters, all of that kind of stuff, you want to think about that. The other part is that if I take this up here and show it to you on the wall, which I typically, we do this when we're showing moving lights to theaters and to any client. they always want to see, what does the framing shutters look like on the wall? And we always do this, and we always kind of, make it bigger, and then we focus it up, and then the big question is, can you get all 4 sides to be in perfect focus? And that is kind of the thing that separates the different manufacturers and the different kinds of fixtures. Because a hair of a millimeter at this point can change how well you can focus in multiple planes. These lights, for focusing multiple planes, they're okay. They're not great. They're okay. But again, how often is it that you're trying to frame out a piece of paper? Our moving lights that we have in rentals that are the kind of the big brother to these ones, the Halcyon Gold Ultra Bright fixtures, the same fixtures that are used on Lion King and Wicked, those lights are significantly better for framing. But it's a different sort of an animal, right? And at some point in time, the question becomes, what's important to you? And so we often say, for many of our theater clients, our community theater clients and our church clients, they often find that, you know what, they're just fine with what the Lone Star can do, and the Lone Star can work out really, really well, because we're typically using that function to mask light off of getting it off of a set piece or something of that sort. And when you're just using it for that, then it can work really, really quite nicely. But again, if you're wondering which of these two can I focus up on, that's what you're going to get. Okay, we are almost done. There is one more thing that we have to talk about. You cannot talk about moving lights without talking about this. Everything that I've done so far tonight has been somewhat cumbersome. Everything that I've done, I've had to click, 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 over and over again, click, 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 trying to get things to where I want them to go. Instead, I could just do this. I could just say, okay, all you fixtures go to center. Go to where the podium was. Go to stage right. Go to stage left, which I have labeled backwards. Fan out across the stage. Go to podium. Go to fan out. Hey, you two middle lights. You two middle lights. You two go to the podium, and the other ones stay out there. The same thing goes for color. Let me just go back to fanning out, go to color. I can now go to red, to yellow, to cyan, to pink, to amber, and I have worked out with the director, this is the color I'm thinking about for that scene when it needs to get a little bit darker, but I need to create kind of it's a sunset. This is what I'm thinking about for that color. Do you like it? Yes, I like that. We're in agreement? Yes, we're in agreement. Great. I'm going to record that as this. I'm going to call that my sunset palette. And don't forget, Mr. Director, you said it was okay, so don't change it again later. But I can now set that color as opposed to every time I go to pull up that same scene, I have to go, oh, right, what color was it? Was it this? Was it this? Because one of the problems that we have with LEDs, one of the problems we have with moving lights, is that now we don't have those 4 colors of gel that we could afford for this show. Now we've got way too many colors. We got so many colors that now we have a problem where we don't have enough time to get through all the programming because we've got too many colors. So now we start at the beginning of the show and we say, this is the color I'm going to choose for my amber, and this is my color I'm going to choose for my red. And if you say, you know what? Actually, Carl, I don't like that red. I like this for my red that's got a little bit more pinky magenta-y in it, then I go, great, we'll call that red. Now whenever I click on amber, it's amber. Whenever I click on that, that's red. And for this show, that's red. And when I want to go to center, I go to center. And we're calling that center. Forget about the fact that the entire truss is off center to the room tonight. This is what I'm calling center. And that's what it is for this show. Because I took the time before the show, before you got here, I took the time to set these positions and say, this is my podium position. And then I made sure that I got out with the spike tape and marked the podium. Don't look at the floor. I maybe forgot that part. But I'm going to make sure that I get that stuff set so that I can program things really, really quickly. And so that as I'm building out my show, I know that I need something that's going to cover the entire cyc, right? Because I need to be able to create that look. So I'm going to do that. I know that I need something at Podium. I know that I need this, etc., etc. So I build those. Every moving light console in the world has that functionality, has the ability to record presets. They might call them something different, but they're all there. And you can create presets for a variety of different things. You can make presets for color, for intensity, for gobo, for iris, for all kinds of things. One of my favorite ones, which we've discovered on here, you can't do it exactly the way that I really like to do it, but what I typically will do whenever I'm programming is I'll say, I want to have a gobo focus on the cyc. This is what it is, focused, hard focused. This is what the gobo looks like. Then I want to throw it out of focus a little bit and say, that is my soft focus. And then I switch to the second gobo wheel, which is slightly offset in the light, and I do the same thing. So that if I am switching between different gobo wheels, now I have different focus palettes. Focus palettes for each of those things. And then I have a different focus for where the iris is. And I have a different, because remember we said the focus for the iris is in a different spot than it is when it's open white. Do you see what I'm getting at? If I build all of those things so that I'm quick, then I can move through it really, really fast. When I was much younger than I am now, and I was using track spots or the lights at the back of the room here that Horizon's owned for 18 and a half years that still work fine. When I was doing shows with those all the time, and we had a whole bunch of them doing shows, why people hired me was not because I could pick the perfect magenta. It was because I could move fast. And now I can't, I'm getting old. But it was, I could do it fast because I could build out presets and I knew what I was looking for, so that when the director, when the choreographer, when the designer that I was working with, when they said, can you pull up this really quick? It was like bang, 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 bang. There. How does that look? Oh, wow. That looks great. Save that one. Let's go to the next one. And when we were knocking off like literally 80 to 100 cues a day and then running a 3-hour show and then doing it again the next day, because it's dance season or it's figure skating season or whatever, that's what you had to be able to do. So you might say, but Carl, I'm only renting 2 moving lights for a couple of days. Is it really worthwhile building those presets? Absolutely. And here's the most important part. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to say, move out all these podium pieces to here. And then somebody is going to come along and say, actually, Carl, the podium's got to be moved over here. Now what I can do is I can grab those lights and I can just move this over to where the podium is, re-record podium, and now all of my cues that have podium preset for the position for those 4 lights, all of those are updated. So that when the director does say, actually, Carl, I don't really like that color. I know that I said I did, but look at the costumes. The costumes look different than what we thought. then I can go and I can change that amber color so that the amber color changes throughout the entire show for that. It is a building block. If you're into programming, it's a variable. That variable can be changed all the way through. Cool? All right. Back to PowerPoint. 5 things to remember. Think about where your fixtures are going. We've talked about it multiple times tonight. Think about how are the fixtures aligned? Where are they going as far as the distance from the subject that you're trying to light? You've seen me kind of playing around with the focus a little bit in the zoom. You need to be able to make sure that you can cover the area that you're trying to do. I'm thinking about, there's nobody here tonight from Itopa in Ingersoll. I don't know if Bob or anybody from Itopa is watching online today, but I would have a very difficult time hanging these lights on their stage because, frankly, their stage is lower than this truss is. So you need to think about where you're going to put those lights. Know the fixture's features and limitations. We talked about things like color. Do I have color mixing or do I have a color wheel? How is that going to play into what I'm doing? If I have a color wheel, then that move well dark feature becomes really important to how I'm programming my show. Does that make sense? Is what I'm saying there make sense? Because I want to be able to change color when it's black rather than, and I don't really want to have to program in each one of those blackouts and then the change color during the blackout. Take the time to build presets and palettes. If I didn't sell you on that already, come back, I'll tell you again. It's just so important. Bright in white does not mean bright when all the features are stacked together, right? You saw how bright 4 lights looked when they were stacked all on top of each other, but then when we started to add in Gobos and Prism and everything else, it's not nearly as bright. So think about how that all works together. And what other lights on stage? It goes along the same thing we talk to clients so often today about, I want to use video projection on my cyc to go along with my show. Great. We can do that. How much light is on your stage? How much light is hitting your cyc? How are you going to work with that? And then the last one for tonight is, how are you going to get from here to there? And that is all about the move well dark. How are you planning out how are things going to move? Because sometimes you want to see the movement. You might go to a show at Stratford and you might be sitting in the audience and go, hey, I just saw all the lights move. Did the designer really want that? I guarantee you if you saw the lights move at Stratford, they wanted that. And if they did want that, they probably wanted to draw you into what's going on. They wanted to draw your attention to what's going on. They wanted you to maybe not be looking at something else. They did that in Winter's Tale? Yeah. They want you to be drawn into or over to an area or to a character to see what's going on. It's part of time movement or it's time, something like that. But there's lots of times when we don't want that because the moving part of a moving light is boring. Because then it's just a follow spot, right? There's all kinds of other cool things it does. All right. That's what I got. There you go. Any questions? No? Any questions from online? Pretty quiet tonight, Logan? All right, no questions. So one of the advantages of coming to Horizon is you can ask questions after the live stream, plus you get coffee and cookies. So it's usually a good thing. You're certainly welcome to stick around and ask some questions. I just want to wrap up on a couple of things. There's a couple of things I'm supposed to highlight, right, Jordan? Yes. The grand prize draw that's coming up in December, we already talked about that. So if you're here tonight, then you're in on that draw. What do we got next? Seminars. Yes, the next seminar in October. Actually, Jordan's going to be doing this one. Why doesn't it? What? Sorry. Could we go back to that for a second? What did that say? No, we can't go back to it. So he's getting there. Why doesn't it sound like that online? And so that's the idea of you are working on your, this often happens in churches, sometimes in schools, the idea that it sounds like something in the room, but the live stream does not sound like that. And Jordan's going to be talking through that. He's going to be talking about a number of different pieces that go along with that, and what are some of the things that you can do to solve that. And I think, are you heading out to a church actually in the next week or two? Next week to do some live recording of that church in multiple ways to show how that works, and then we'll be playing back some of that. That is next month. In November, we're going to do one of the seminars that Jordan talked me into, and then I realized afterwards that this is a very difficult subject to talk about, and that is troubleshooting. This is actually something that's near and dear to my heart because I think troubleshooting is probably one of the most interesting and most infuriating things of my job. But we are going to be talking about that. There will be more information coming, and that is on November the 11th, on Remembrance Day. We are also doing a series of seminars throughout the year. We have done what we have referred to as study hall seminars in the past. And the idea of study hall is that it's more focused specifically to schools. And we're taking a little bit of a different approach this year. And what we're doing this year is we are hosting 2 different seminars on a number of PD days where either teachers who have time while they're marking or while they're doing something else, we find that in talking to teachers, many of them have meetings in the morning on their PD days, but often have other things that they're supposed to be doing in the afternoon. And we thought this was a good opportunity for teachers to sit in on a fairly short, about 45 minutes, 50-minute session to talk about the basics of stage lighting. And so whether you are with a elementary or a high school and you're looking to just kind of get some information that's going to help you to do your job and maybe prepare for that next performance at your school, then this is something we're doing. So the first one's on October 10th, but the goal is I think we have 4 different PD days throughout the year. Yeah. And that we're doing this on. And so the first one is actually on lighting. The second one is on microphones, and we're doing them the same day. So, or not on microphones, sorry, it's on sound systems. So the first one we're doing 12:30 to 1:30. The second one is 1:30 to 2:30. There's more information online at resourcestage.ca, so you can check that out. If you know any teachers that you think this would be advantageous for, then please let them know. Of course, yes, absolutely, they're free. And anybody can join them, but we're kind of focusing them on teachers and on students. And this idea that, again, we made it at 12:30 so that the students could wake up on their PD day. They'll hopefully have a chance to have breakfast by 12, and they can join us and watch online. So that is Resource Stage Study Hall. What am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anything? Anybody? That's it for the stuff we've got that back there. Any of the fixtures that we've got here tonight, we do rent. Consoles, we do rent. We do training. We're going to Theater Tilsonburg tomorrow to do training on the new Q mixer. So if that is something that we can help you out with in your school or in your theater or in your church or wherever, then let us know and we will come and help you out with that. Okay, I think that's it. Thanks for coming. I hope that it was helpful, and we hope to see you at the next resource stage. Have a good night.